Hey, how y'all doing? Dan Land Pro here, 100 videos in 100 days. Hey, we on episode 88, and we call this one breaking news because, I do whatever I think. So I hope you go over to YouTube, hit that subscribe and that like button, Webmaster Dan or Dan Land Pro, because we're going to continue to bring you content as long as God willing will allow me to have this platform, continue to build this platform, speak my views and opinions, which is really what breaking news is all about. This episode is about understanding the significance of creating your own platforms, creating your own content, and having it where you can voice your views and opinions, whether people agree or disagree with you or not, where you can be in control of your own imagery. Now, recently I've been studying something called dynamic communications, and what it does is it takes things out of the analytic approach to things and put it in what they call a synthesis form. So instead of taking a problem and trying to break it down to one thing or one part, thinking that if you resolve that particular part or fragment of a problem that you can solve the problem, is pretty much unrealistic. So when you take the problem and you look at the problem as a whole and see that no matter what part you take from that problem, it's going to have an impact or effect on that problem, then you're pretty much on your way to a modern form of thinking, which is out of analytics and into synthesis, which brings better resolve. Understanding that regardless of, say, socioeconomics, as far as the things that exist in some of the neighborhoods, thinking that by solving the economic problem that I'm going to solve the drug problem or the violence problem or all the other problems associated with that particular situation is unrealistic. When I look at that problem as a whole, then I have to understand that economics has an impact on that problem, and how much money I pump into economics in that particular environment will have some type of change on that environment or that problem, whether it's positive or negative, but it will not solely solve all the problems of that particular situation. So that's pretty much what synthesis is all about. It's understanding the problem as a whole. So understanding a fragment of a problem is like understanding a symptom of a disease or illness. You cannot just understand the symptoms and expect to solve or cure the illness. You have to understand the illness as a whole and see how that illness might affect the body in itself or your health in itself. And that usually comes from thinking on a synthesis and synthesis thinking opposed to analytics. So we don't have to get deep because I'm not an authority or a professor or anything like that on dynamic communications. It's just an experience I had and found it fascinating that not only do the things in the past impact how our system functions and how it causes those changes, whether negative or positive, but we constantly put inputs or new inputs into that system, which causes changes and impact us in positive and negative ways, regardless of what age we are or our economic status or anything else. We function as a system, as individuals and as a collective. And once we start understanding these systems through system thinking, we can resolve problems better and we become better problem solvers opposed to breaking it down into analytics, thinking that by analyzing the problem, we can pinpoint one part of the problem and solve the problem. It's like your car stopped running and you think just because the battery is having problems that solved the problem, when it could be the battery impacted by the alternator, impacted by some electrical problem, etc., etc. So you have to see the operation of the automobile as a whole and how it functions as a system to see what inputs is impacting that system that may have an effect on all of those parts that may seem to be the problem. Hey, I'm not going to get too deep with it. I call it breaking news because, see, the things that excite me and interest me, which is spirituality, which is social dance, which is poverty, which is homelessness, which is all of some of the things that I've experienced in life. When those things interest me and trying to find solutions or better ways to address the problems or problem solving is my thing. For example, you hear me talk a lot about social dance. I'm gonna always talk about it because, like I said, I view it from a synthesis way of thinking opposed to analytics. And when I see it that way, I see the problem as a whole. That system is being impacted by so many inputs, negative inputs, that it can't function as the system that it is, because these negative inputs is constantly impacting it and changing it in so many different ways. By the time one thing is almost resolved, it got another negative input coming in and upsetting that system and how it actually functions. And we all want to see that system function in the proper way. You hear people say all the time, it's just a dance, have fun. I say it myself from a social perspective, but from a historic perspective and from how that dance function as a system and has impacted people's life for generations, and some of those environmental inputs that comes into that environment from those generations. It's not just a dance. It's not just something that you just do and have fun, because it got so many moving parts. It's a system, and we are part of that system, especially those of us who take a strong interest in it and have a strong presence in it, not just on the dance floor. Overall, a passion for it, emotions for it, wanting to see it sweep the nation by storm, as you always hear, wanting to see people embrace it and see it for the beauty that we see it for, wanting to see people enjoy it and understand it from a more deeper perspective than a 6 count or 8 count, or going to a white party or some thematic party where it's just the main advertisement, you know, the step in white party, the step in this, or the bop in this, is just so much deeper. So when you perceive it from a system opposed to analytics, because analytics are not working, because analytics breaks it down into me believing that I can solve the problem if everybody just do the 8 count. Or I could solve the problem if I take a part of the problem and say that if everybody just listen to classic music, or everybody just listen to contemporary music, the problems that the young and the old is having in that system will be resolved, when that's not necessarily the case. When we see it functioning as a system, then you see that, like a battery and an alternator, the old and the young can function without each other within that system. So if you see stepping as a system, or bopping and the new bop, and how all of those variables play a role in that system and how it functions now based on those variables, then you'll understand how one of those variables, if it's off the rails, can impact the whole system. And that's really what's happening. So it's hard to bring some resolve or solve problems when we don't really perceive it from a systemic perspective, and we keep breaking it down into these analytics that clearly don't work any more than they work in the community, or any more than they work with homelessness, any more with poverty, with joblessness, with drug addiction, violence, domestic violence, etc., etc. You cannot break those problems down into one part, because they functioning as a system, and they function as a system among select groups of people, which tell you that it's a system. So you must perceive it from a systemic perspective, which means you can start solving problems and bringing those solutions to light, which you know that when you have environmental inputs, negative or positive, they're going to change that system in some way. The problem is we keep bringing all these negative inputs. What about the positive inputs, which could be more money, which could be more housing, which could be more rehabilitation, which could be more sobriety oriented programs or educational programs. Same with dance. If you start inputting more positive inputs in that environment, where you understand that the classic music and the contemporary music must coexist, must run parallel in order to have a positive impact on that system. You cannot have one or the other pitted against each other and expect that system to function, because that's not how it evolved. That's not how it developed. That's not how it came to be. Which came first and which came second is significant. Just like a car, it didn't always have a radio or a heater in it. So even though it functions within that system, you can't take it out of the car now without having some impact on how that system runs, because it's hard to ride in a car without a heater. Even though it came after the engine or the engineering, that heater is important to the driver now. Now you got apps and you got all these other things that drivers are accustomed to, so they are part of that system. And how you negatively or positively impact that system affects that driver and everybody in that car. And it's the same way in the dance community, it's the same way in the religious community. It's just that a lot of times we're not looking at it from a systemic perspective, we're looking at it from analytics, trying to find what is the problem, which person can we blame, which club can we blame, which church can we blame, which preacher can we blame, when it's a system that you must focus on and concentrate on. Hey, you know I don't like to keep you long, and I kept you longer today than necessary. But it's my breaking news, episode 88. I just want to talk about something real today other than just drawing and tools and microphones and video. I want you to see a more in-depth perspective of what's to come when these 100 videos in 100 days is pretty much concluded. We're going to be dealing with some problems and some views and opinions from a systemic perspective based off system thinking and synthesis opposed to analytics. Now, I'm giving you my 12 remaining episodes in order to probably go and find out some of what I'm talking about, because I'll be associating system thinking with all the things I just mentioned. Not just social dance, but so many different things. And you'll get to understand some of the things that I've been experiencing the last maybe 3 years, or I've been dealing with the last 3 years, or studying or researching the last 3 years, that I believe can have a positive impact wherever we place that particular learning. Hey, my name is Dan Land Pro, 100 videos in 100 days. This is episode 88, breaking news. Until next time. Webmaster Dan, Dan Land Pro, YouTube.com. Hit that subscribe and that like button. I'll talk to y'all later. Episode 89 coming up soon. Peace.